it's actually become like a really viable alternative to learning about a lot of things that people don't have access to because they're in sort of a 9-to-5 grind or they're outside of the academy or whatnot. I think the trouble is like trying to establish what are like valid sources of information, right?
Right,
because,
absolutely.
So we can go and do this, right? And like, but like, you know, how is someone going to know like anything that I'm going to say is like going to have any air of authority,
right?
Besides maybe the bravado that I say it with, right?
Yeah.
So there's a great worry about misinformation, out there,
absolutely.
But hopefully that sort of like naturalizes itself and organically people sort of develop consensus about the sources of information. But it raises interesting questions about how you break into that and get people to take things like what we're doing today seriously. And I've often thought about doing something that parallels podcasting to engage people's imaginations, not only verbally but visually, and orally. And like I've thought about making like philosophical documentaries and shorts and things like that to convey. Because I don't think everybody has the time to masticate like all of this corpus of like philosophical material. It's like draining and it's a luxury, and like we have dwindling luxury in this country as it is right now.
Right, indeed.
Right? And so it's a very elite group that can actually has the time to be able to devote to this. So I think what would be really interesting is trying to find a way to like distill these big ideas into like cinematic format.
Yeah.
And you see like that's kind of. You see some people, like, there's kind of some inroads being made with that, like, the lectures that are being passed around, like the TED Talks and things that you can pick up on YouTube. But I don't know. I think there's still a lot of room for creativity there.
Yeah.
But that's an idea that I have after like post PhD stuff. So what ground did you want to cover today? Did you have like questions that throw at me?
Oops. I probably will ask some questions that I like prepared beforehand, but I kind of like the organic sort of just the way the conversation develops naturally. And I've found that when I have conversations with people, I often wish that I could record the first conversation that we ever had, because I feel like it's so poignant and
there's an unscripted kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
This is the weird thing, is trying to forget that you're being watched, that you're being recorded.
Yeah.
I experience this all the time, like when I'm in the studio, right? Like, and I encounter this with like vocalists who go into a vocal booth or something like that. Like, we like have to trick them.
Yeah.
They're just like, we're just like, oh, you're just warming up. We're telling them, you're just warming up. And like secretly we'll hit record.
Yeah, right.
Because almost always the best take is the one they're doing in preparation for the real take.
Yes.
But we just roll anyway.
Yeah.
To capture that first thing.
And they don't mind that you tricked them in the end because you get a good take.
But now that I've told you the secret and this is going to go out into the world, like they're going to be like, am I being watched? And they're going to fuck it up no matter what.
Yeah. Now it's all just going to crash.
Yeah.
I do believe that though. I mean, that's actually one of the things that podcasting brought to my attention is, I mean, there's just so much information in the world, it's like, and that's one of the things that is interesting to me to talk with to you, just you being in philosophy or whatever. Like, philosophy is such a broad topic, and there are all those fractured areas of philosophy.
Yeah,
and
it's really
like,
blurry.
People, it's not even unified in a
Definitely
sense, because these people are like, this is true, and those other people are like, no, you guys are wrong, And so, I mean, it's like, okay, we present the information. How can people decide whether it's true or not? It's no longer that, whoever has the nicest shirt on is going to be correct. It's more like, does this resonate with what has been my experience or whatever? And so it's like very pedestrian almost.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge question.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could talk about the very nature of the splintering of the academy and the specialties that people get themselves involved in, and the fiefdoms and the wars those fiefdoms have with each other. But I mean, I think about this question a lot within my own research in regards to Kierkegaard.
Okay.
Because like he was profoundly concerned with this issue.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's a direction you want to go with.
Yeah, totally.
But like, he was obsessed with the question of like how philosophy is to relate to our life.
Right.
And I think he had access to grind all over the place. He alienated a lot of different people because ultimately he had real problems with the way the professional philosophy was being taught. That it was sort of like this all-seeing eye, this sort of thing that could solve everything. That there were no limits to reason. It was all about scholasticism, and everything else could be jettisoned, and everything had to be viewed through this paradigm. And he thought there was something hopelessly incomplete about that. Not only did he think that was delusional, right? That other philosophers had sort of already shown the world, like Kant, right, through the Critique of Pure Reason, the limitations of the things that we can actually conceive of. So he thought, like, A, that's a fool's errand, and B, it really neglects the subjective aspect of our lives, the things that we find meaning in, the things that that resonate to us as being true in our personal experience.
Right.
And it doesn't address any of those things. Maybe philosophers would say, well, that's more properly under the domain of psychology, but psychology doesn't really address it in the same way either. And so Kierkegaard kind of has like this really sort of anomalous existence where he's kind of he doesn't really have like a loyal following within the modern academy as a result of this. He's a Christian existentialist.
Okay.
So he's considered the father of existentialism, but every existentialist that followed him could never ascend to his ideas about faith.
Right.
And they went a more secular, agnostic, atheistic route. And because he railed against all the rationalism and scientism that was going on within the academy, he's not widely taught within modern philosophy either. So he's an anomaly. He's outside of the academy, and that's kind of what I want to do too. Is like I want to engage the public, and kind of the way that he did is be more poetic, be more rhetorical, speak more profoundly to the individual experience, and not be so obsessed with, I don't know, reducing all philosophical problems to like quasi-logical mathematical language, which is like all the trend right now, and who fucking cares? Man? At the end of the day.
I mean, I've looked at stuff like that, you know, it's like diagrams with like this pointing here, and like, or like I picked up Spinoza one time and opened it, and I was just like, I have no clue what this guy's talking about. Just because he uses variables and things like that, you know? It's like very strange, like super clinical.
Yeah, and I think I want to say that there's value in that. And in the sense, I think there's a training and a disciplining of the mind as a result of that very rigorous philosophy that's like more analytic and logical. I'm not a Spinoza expert, but I can only imagine that
he could be.
Well, if you decide to devote, a great deal of your life to it, you can. But my experience with those things, I would say they didn't ultimately bestow truth and meaning upon my life, but I do think there was a sort of intellectual rigor and preparation for possibly opening myself up to other forms of philosophical expression and artistic expression. Okay. So it's not worthless.
Right.
But perhaps all I'm suggesting is that perhaps the expectations shouldn't be so high.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That I think a lot of philosophers try to lure people into their fellowship or into their discipline or whatever because of promises about like, oh, we'll give you the great big picture one day.
Yeah.
And I don't think it works like that.
Right.
I think philosophy.
So you think that is something that happens? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, please.
That was interesting because, it's like, is that something that philosophy is trying to sell, or is
that's why you have so many disputes. Is that they're each trying to sell a different paradigm that opens up all the mysteries of the universe, right? And so they encourage a sort of dogmatism between them all, right? So you get to this point where Kantians can't engage Hegelians, and Hegelians can engage people who do Spinoza, and people who are doing that modern philosophy stuff can't engage the analytic people. Like, they're cordoned off because they think their worldview is the one that's answering everything. And so I think that's why you encounter all this sort of antagonism within philosophy itself, and it's probably infected the other disciplines within the academy as well. Now, I mean, these are gross generalizations, but I'm just talking about something that I perceive as I grow older and become more pragmatic, less idealistic, but I tend to see dogmatism more and more. Like,
Yeah.
I tend to see it everywhere, not just in religion, but in anti-religion.
Right,
and
right.
And not just in right-wing politics, but in left-wing
Absolutely.
politics. And not, and not just in, and not just in like uneducated people, but incredibly educated people.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm this fixation with my truth being the whole truth,
Right.
seems to be part and parcel of the human experience, no matter what your politics are, your religion are, what your educational background is. And
Do you think that there is a strong current of that?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think the really interesting question is, why as humans, regardless of the plurality of background experiences that we come from,
right,
why does this keep showing up?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
What is it about being human that causes us to keep going back to ideology?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really fascinating question.
Yeah, it really is. Do you have a hypothesis or any kind of like beacons in the night?
I think you have to go to subjective experience to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is probably the Kierkegaard coming out in me, I think you have to look at despair.
Okay.
And I think not everybody's going to like where Kierkegaard ends up with these things. He ultimately ends up embracing Christianity, which is something that's, unjustifiable from a rational, logical point of view. That's why everybody talks about the leap of faith in Kierkegaard.
Okay.
Although that's not the only leap of faith. There are many leaps of faith. But that tends to be the one that gets...
I like the one of the Big Bang. One of my favorite philosophers, Terence McKenna, he says, science only asks for one miracle, and that's the Big Bang. And they just put it in the beginning.
Yeah. We're not going to obsess on that one too much. Which raises great questions about philosophy of physics, which we can go in that direction too. I would love to. I was reading something about M theory last week, and how Hawking sort of weighed in on that. And, well, that got me all agitated. But I think something that the Kierkegaard rubbing off on me, a lot of the conversations that I have with individuals, something that has become an obsession of mine is, and maybe this isn't right, but it seems like individuals are in despair wherever you look.
Okay.
They may not even know that they're in despair. Kierkegaard will call this unconscious despair. Okay. It's not like a fever that comes and goes. It's something that they're constantly in. They may be able to lull ourselves into something resembling happiness or contentment for a short period of time, but resurfaces eventually. And I think for whatever reason, humans are in despair. Okay. And there are a variety of ways, I think, in a hierarchy, that we can go about trying to ward off that despair. Okay. If we're not brainy, cerebral, intellectual people, we might turn to like sensate categories. Yeah. We may try to anesthetize ourselves with alcohol and drugs and maybe even like
sex, materialism,
fitness, maybe. Yeah, fitness. Like anything.
Philosophy.
Well, and Kierkegaard will say that as well. As you climb this ladder, it's not so. So it could be sensate categories. It could be erotic stuff. It could be even things that's something that passes itself off as high-minded romance. Yeah. Okay. Infatuation with beauty. Yeah. Poetry, art, and speculation, philosophy, most definitely. In a way, these things, they either have this ability to distract us from actually confronting the fact that we are in despair, or they paper over the world enough and give us sort of a comfortable sort of mapping so we can navigate this world. It doesn't really matter if it's correct or not, as long as it like sort of orients us. Yeah. And I think people cling to these things. If you're calling to somebody's question, like why they tend to be so obsessed with a person or with a lifestyle choice or a philosophical outlook, or if you really, I think that's why people start to get defensive about it. Because if they start to be made aware of the despair, that thing that gives their whole life meaning, that's structured their whole life.
Yeah.
They might have to confront something really ugly about themselves, and it's not just the people that I'm calling into question. I'm saying we all have it.
Yeah.
And that's what Kierkegaard wanted us to do, is to focus on it, and why we have it, how we get out of it, and
how closely does he associate that with mortality?
The fear of death.
Yeah. Because, like, the Buddha is, the Buddha or whatever, he sets a precedence as far as, like, suffering is concerned, It's like the work of the Buddha to say desire is the cause of suffering. If you can, eliminate your desire, you can eliminate your suffering. And so, it's possible that Kierkegaard could have read the Buddha, It's like, and so I wonder, because, like, we're blurring the line between something that's completely, like, quote unquote academic or empirical, and then something spiritual. Well,
Kierkegaard was fundamentally concerned with the spiritual.
Yeah.
And this is a fascinating. I'm glad you brought up the point of view of Buddhism.
Okay.
And this is something I want to pursue, but I haven't had a chance to work this out. I can't tell if Kierkegaard was trying to propose a solution to people who were raised and find themselves in Christendom.
Okay.
Or if he was trying to propose a solution to humanity writ large.
Okay.
Because if it's only the despair and all these things, the attachment and the suffering, this might be only, this may be only really applicable to, like, sort of a materialistic capitalist West or something like that. Those things maybe in the East may not be as locked into the cultural perspective. I have to spend time there. I can't really speak to that.
Well, I can address that briefly, really quick, with Jung. Basically, Jung says that Westerners should not try to do yoga or do anything in the East until he gives us
great.
middle age. He says when you're 40 or whatever, then you can start, because he thinks that we don't have a true understanding of the yin, or, like, resting state, and that we will apply yang active principles to the yin state and sort of, like, try to force this rest. And so, I mean, that would just be something to think about.
I'll definitely have to think about it, because there's this third rail path about people who are born, quote unquote, within Christendom, whatever that means.
Right.
But who don't acknowledge themselves as Christians and seek out Eastern alternatives, like you're suggesting.
Yeah.
I mean, we're here in Athens, Georgia. There are probably more people in Athens, Georgia that attend yoga studios than church or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so they live in this. It's got to be hell for them in some respect, right?
Yeah.
Like, you live in a society that talks about the ideal being falling in love, but you're at the same time practicing, meditation or denial, or that says you that you can't get attached to something. So how do you reconcile this cognitive dissonance? I don't know. So you've got, I guess, really three sort of predicaments at the very least. So I don't know.
Perfect quote.
But so I mean, I think what. I'd have to probably do a lot of meditation to know this for certain. If meditation and all that enlightenment and whatever could actually get rid of this despair that we've been talking about, or if it's just going to creep back in temporarily, and the only way to really sort of get out of it is to just, like, annihilate the self by constantly meditating like a monk or something.
Right.
And Kierkegaard that would be at odds for Kierkegaard, because I think he's presupposing a fundamental sort of cultural anthropology.
Okay.
That there is a God.
Yeah.
And this God wants us to become individuals.
Okay.
Through experience. And that ultimately this despair and everything else is pushing us out of animality, pushing us away from sort of universal ethics, ultimately into a direct relationship with God in order to experience some sort of felicity and tranquility.
Wow.
So the whole idea, the whole trajectory of the project is that, and this is what I think is really exciting about Kierkegaard, is, and at odds with much of cultural Christianity in America.
Okay.
is that God wants us to be radically individualistic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas the way that Christianity is sort of portrayed in a lot of America is that it's a set of rules, it's a doctrine, everybody has to think, talk, look the same, and like that drives a fuck ton of people away from Christianity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they feel like they're being judged, they don't fit in, and
they don't like it.
Right, exactly. No,
this is boring.
Yeah, who the fuck wants to conform to that? Right.
Nobody.
And what Kierkegaard is saying, is that God wants us in all our sort of givenness, empirical being. We don't have to compromise or lose any of that, but the internal self sort of becomes reconstituted. So,
it's deep.
I don't have to give up on philosophy. I don't have to give up on avant-garde rock music. I don't have to give up on weight training. I don't have to give up on I don't really have to give up on any of those things, but my perspective on how I'm attached to them and what I want to see them do in the world, that may change.
Yeah.
But I don't have to renounce the world if I'm doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the
that's
gist.
Interesting.
That's just kind of the gist of the Kierkegaardian project.
And he was pretty radical in that opinion. I'm not sure the dates of Kierkegaard.
He was writing in the first half of the 19th century.
Okay.
And he in his crosshairs he had he had become very dissatisfied with really two sets of or two groupings of Christianity.
Okay.
The way that was being practiced among sort of the lay folk, and the way that it was sort of being promulgated within the academy.
Okay.
And his problem with the lay folk was that people were perceiving their Christian identity as something they were merely born into.
Okay.
Right? So it was like being Christian was sort of like an extension of them being Dutch. Right?
Right.
If someone's like, okay, you check out the box, like you're like, I'm Dutch, and my dad was a Christian, so I'm a Christian here. Right. And so what he wanted to do was he found that very disturbing, because what he thought is that people were being lulled into this false relationship with religion, and what he wanted to do was to offend and provoke them, so that they would either leave the faith or embrace it more passionately.
Right.
Again, the anthropology that he's presupposing is that God only wants you unless you're crazy for him, and
so
not crazy like a religious.
Was he employed by the church? I mean, who are his patrons?
His biography is sort of an interesting one, and I'm a little sketchy on some of the details.
Okay.
And this is because philosophers don't study biography a lot, and I think they should, because I think they affect the way the ideas get articulated a lot.
I think so, yeah.
My girlfriend right now, she's a clinical psychologist by training.
Okay.
And so we talk about this stuff all the time, and I'm very interested in the ideas, but she's like, that idea is very strange and can be explained by his relationship with his father and all this.
Right. Yeah.
And so
nice.
it's a good, and so we talked about collaborating on some projects as a result.
That's a great idea.
Like doing some existential psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis.
And but anywho, so his biography, it's a very strange one. It's he experienced a great deal of death at a young age.
Yeah.
Which probably would account for his overall gloomy disposition.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I think he had another brother.
Maybe his Christianity.
Yeah, it's hard to say. But here's what I know about his biography. He lost a lot of siblings at an early age. I think his mother died in childbirth.
Wow.
I'm not sure if he was the last one born. He might have been. And he was very fortunate in the sense that his father was a somewhat successful businessman, and left him with enough of an inheritance that he didn't have to, after he finished his PhD, he didn't have to busy himself with teaching or any of that. He gave some thought to maybe becoming a pastor or something to that effect, but he just lived off the inheritance. And I don't know, because he lost all those siblings at a young age, and he lost his mother at a young age, I don't know but he had a premonition of sorts that he was going to die young.
Yeah.
He was convinced that he was going to die young.
Okay.
He ended up dying at 42 or 43, which may seem relatively young to us, but which is great when I think he wrote 25 or 30 books.
Yeah.
And it was, and some of the books are 400, 600 pages long. We're not talking about like a 100-page treatise here,
Yeah.
Or like 150 pages. And so,
Massive offerings.
He was just, he felt he was going to die young, and he was inspired, and he was a genius. And all those things came together, and he just wrote prolifically. The other part about his biography that gets talked about a great deal is that he was engaged at a young age to a woman named Regine Olsen. Okay? And they were very much in love, but for reasons that are still very murky to this day, he sort of broke off the engagement at the last moment.
Wow.
And this destroyed Regine. It made him a laughingstock in the community because she came from a good family, and they were like, "You're crazy for doing this."
Yeah.
And no one really knows why he did it. There's theories out there that maybe he had inherited venereal disease from his mother, and he couldn't bear the thought of passing it on to his wife and potential children.
Right.
There is some thought that he may have been, he had a lot of health issues.
Mm-hmm.
He may have been impotent or something like that, and he didn't, he may have been doing that out of concern for her. But the explanation that I find the most compelling, and maybe all these things are true. I think he felt like he was called by God to do what he did.
Yeah.
And I think he thought that he couldn't fulfill his divine mission if he had a wife and children running around. And that his purpose on this earth was to make it so that we're talking not about him so much, but about a radical new approach to Christianity that needed to be proliferated and promulgated because of the cultural concerns. The other, aside from the fact that he was talking to the Lutheran Dutch public at the time, he was also talking to Hegelians at the time. The Hegelian ideology had sort of swept over all of Europe, and he was very much enraged. And he was very concerned about Hegelians because it was sort of this. It was this rationalistic approach to faith where, like, all faiths were sort of seen as this unfurling of the absolute marching through time.
Okay.
And he had a lot of problems with that. Mainly because he felt like kind of coldly studying religion wasn't going to ultimately reconcile people with God. But also, ultimately, I think he thought it was sort of blasphemous that, like, God would create generations of people solely, so one day maybe in the future, like the ultimate Christian state could be brought into existence, and that people that weren't participants in that movement were essentially useless to God. Yeah. So if you didn't participate in the world, like that. He was very
intolerable idea, really.
Yeah. He was very. There's this great analogy he uses. I can't remember where, but he on that worldview, every individual. I think he says something to the effect that individuals look like they have as much a role in the world as, say, like someone playing the triangle in an orchestra.
Yeah.
That like some people matter more than others, and what he wanted to do through his approach to religion and Christianity is for everybody to understand that their life, no matter if they're isolated on an island in the Bermuda Triangle or something like that, or if they're in 21st century America, or they lived 500 years ago, all the lives matter the same.
Right.
Ultimately, they matter to you, but ultimately, God wants each one of us to be drawn close to Him through a certain type of relationship.
Yeah.
So that's what Kierkegaard was
pretty
really
beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing, and the thing is, it needs to be retold. I'm glad we're doing this today. I think something that Kierkegaard didn't have to deal with. Mm-hmm. He was speaking largely to Christian audiences, but different varieties of it. Mm-hmm. So kind of Philistine cultural Christians and also academic philosophers that had woven Christianity into their thoughts, either to have it be socially acceptable or because they were too afraid or something. It would have been interesting to see, like, how Kierkegaard would have engaged Marxism.
Yeah.
How Kierkegaard would have engaged modern politics and socialism and things like that. Because these are collectivist movements.
Yeah.
All right. These are extensions of the via Marx, these are extension of sort of the idea that history is unfolding and you have to sacrifice your life for the state or some future cause or something like that. No matter, don't worry, we can't guarantee that it's going to happen, but rest assured that's the most noble thing an individual can do with their life.
Right.
And it's surprising. I shouldn't say this, but it surprises me how many people are comfortable with that idea.
Yeah.
That, like,
it seems that's probably the thing that's of like very strong interest to me is like how we can be in this society now. I mean, not even in the socialist like ideas. Like, how can we exist in this society and sort of like just accept the nature of the status quo and like accept, you know, gender roles and like how crappy education is, and like when we're completely aware that we could do better, you know, and why isn't there a strong pushback, you know? Should we move this bench like that way?
Yeah,
slightly?
let's do it so we don't get rained on. I don't want your beer to spill on your iPhone. Is it moving?
Yeah, mine.
Oh, I've got I'm stuck.
All right. Beautiful. Looks good. Looks real good.
You know, and Nick, I think that's what you're saying. I think this is part of the problem. What you're saying, like, why do we have this status quo? Right? We've got what we've got is we've got individuals wrapped up in movements.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Nice.
They're wrapped up in certain cultural movements.
Right.
And there's no room for nuance. Right. like you're either like a conservative or a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican. Like if you part ways on one issue, well, you're getting kicked out. You're with the wrong team.
Right.
And then so where do free thinking individuals go who may hold a plurality of viewpoints?
Indeed.
And oftentimes they're neglected.
Yeah.
And so what happens? We have the same sort of stale solutions to problems that aren't going away.
Right.
That seem to be intractable. So I think that I don't know if Kierkegaard was that concerned with politics. I think ultimately he was concerned with people and their connection with trying to get them out of despair and trying to reconcile them with God. But it'd be interesting. I think there's a lot of practical import there, and I think, and to be specific about it, the practical import from Kierkegaard's perspective, if we could see ideology for what it is, which is an illusion, right?
Yeah.
And that certainty in regards to anything, science, religion, politics, of any brand or whatever, is a total canard, right? Like that maybe this would tamp down the radicalism, and that we could actually have people of goodwill. Because so Kierkegaard was all about. He didn't think there was like good guys, bad guys. Everybody was everyone was ethical. Everybody wanted to strive to be an ethical and a good person. They may have a different interpretation of what that ethical is, but there was none of this divisiveness. This is crazy talk.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, if you can have the perspective of, okay, like this person may have an R by their name, or this person may have a D by their name, or this person may have an I by their name, but ultimately, like these aren't my adversaries or my opponents or anything like that.
Right.
You know, if I presume that they're just people of goodwill,
right?
I mean, I don't know. I get really excited about what we could potentially accomplish politically. Like if we could take the best ideas from all over the place. But that's where I'm still an idealist, you know, in the sense that could still happen.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a beautiful thing, because it's stultifying the way that American politics is right now.
Absolutely.
it's whatever we're doing is not working.
It's just a pissing contest to me at this point. It's just like whoever can come up with the most, you know, the best sound bites, and you know, we talk about that like it's okay, sort of too. It's like,
your team won.
Yeah.
Your guy won. Now what?
Right. Exactly. What is going to happen next?
Now what? I mean, there's an article in the Onion. I find the Onion.
The Onion.
I feel like the Onion distills like so many things that we don't want to admit to ourselves.
Isn't it weird that we go to those sources too, like,
well, it's like
the Daily Show and the Onion and things like that? This is where we're getting like more real news. It's presented satirically, but
well, yeah, I think there's something to that. There's something about a comic that's better at grabbing our attention and communicating truth. Like I think the two articles that I've liked the most out of the Onion recently. One I read yesterday was like most Americans have given up on the idea that the next great technological revolution is going to happen. Yeah. Like it just had like these fake surveys of people who were like, yeah, it was all. I thought maybe like high-speed rail and like this next like innovation was going to come around, but yeah, that's not going to happen. they're all talking about how they got their hopes up and now it's not going to happen.
What they thought was going to happen,
right?
But now I know it's not.
Yeah. I was like that was in hindsight that was really foolish. And the other one I thought was really funny was an interview with Bashir al-Assad, the autocrat president of Syria, and he's like, seriously, how many people do I have to slaughter for you guys to get your attention? Like he's like I've already killed 100,000 people over the past 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I kill 93 people a day. I just killed someone else right now. Do I have to kill like 500,000 people? 1 million people? Like at what point do you take human rights violations seriously?
Yeah.
And like the Onion is like through this caricature is trying to say, wake the fuck up, people. Like everyone's going around talking about human rights. And if you don't do anything about it, they don't exist.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So now we may have disagreements about what the best way to deal with those human rights situations are, and you have to assess all those things, but we're not even talking about it.
Right, indeed.
We're talking about human rights in this country in a lot of different ways, but we're not talking about a bunch of... I can't get my head about it. We talk about human rights more than ever in this country, and we're not talking about 100,000 Syrians being slaughtered.
Yeah.
Oh, this past week, 566 Syrians were killed.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And those are just estimates because they can't even get the UN or Amnesty International or any of the international organizations in there because it's too dangerous.
Wow.
And there's intelligence saying that they use sarin gas on people.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But no one's talking about that.
Yeah.
So what are the things that we hear about, right?
I don't even follow the news, to be honest with you, because
or just like go on
I
Facebook.
don't want to hear about it.
Just go on Facebook, right? Like what are people posting about on Facebook? Like taking pictures
Boston
of
bombing, pictures of food,
pictures of cats.
Yeah, and like, yeah, man, it's a struggle for me because like I want to be engaged in things, and like be engaged with my peers and like be involved in conversations about serious issues with people my age, but like I found that through Facebook or whatever, finding people who are interested in like current events that are meaningful is almost non-existent. And any time that I find, it's like, I have a couple friends who will like post things and I'll be like, yeah, right on, and it's always some kind of like sort of like pseudo-spiritual, like in a sense very like Kierkegaardian thing about be yourself, it's like if you want to be at peace, like learn to accept yourself and like find a way to allow yourself to exist in the world and like do what you believe in, it's like you feel good when you do what you believe in.
Yeah.
That's how you feel good. So like I have a few people like that, and like people who push stuff along, but I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of people who are like using Facebook as a venue to essentially like militantly sort of refuse to accept new information, but less so than that, but just like militantly promote their cause, whatever that may be, with the caveat of like, I refuse to listen to any other reason than this, And it's like really troubling, especially to me. Like when it comes to like grinding axes, I'm an axe grinder on Christianity.
And Kierkegaard would want that.
Yeah. I've always liked him.
But the thing is, Kierkegaard would say there's only two valid responses to Christianity: total offense or ultimate submission to it. And not submission in like I guess like passionate submission to it. Right?
Yeah.
So anything that was like anything that's like people just kind of going through the motions or something like that, like we may display that
it's offensive.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. He wanted to make it more offensive.
Good.
He wanted to there's an interesting parable about him. Is Kierkegaard sat down on a bench like we are right now at age 30.
Okay.
And after he finished his dissertation and everything like that, and the world was industrializing, and he was seeing all the trends in the world were like, I look around, and everywhere I go, things are becoming easier for man. People are inventing things, things are moving faster, da-da-da-da. It's like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I have no contribution to mankind in regards to making it faster, better, easier.
Yeah.
He's like, but what I can do is I can make it harder.
Nice, yeah.
And so what do you want to do? All the philosophical rationalization that had been used to prop up Christianity, tore it down.
Yeah.
And what did he do rather than put something new in its place? What he did is he emphasized the radical paradox that is the incarnation.
Okay.
That it cannot be comprehended by finite reason.
Okay.
And this pissed off everybody.
Yeah.
But the point is that it would sort of sift out the people who weren't really committed to it in the first place, and push those who did have some sort of nascent commitment to it to cling to it that much more. But also, like let's say you have a real serious. I'm not trying to convert you here.
No worries. Yeah.
But he would want you to have that elevated offensiveness.
Yeah.
He actually thinks that let's just say if you ever became open to Christianity, that it's ultimately going to be especially meaningful for you because you as an informed intellectual had to struggle more to grasp Christianity. And in that struggle with Christianity, not only do you sort of evolve and develop as a person and you learn more about yourself, but like it becomes more meaningful and enriches your life in a way that like some person that grows up and like who never questioned it is never going to have. So
that totally makes sense.
He would be fascinated by you.
Yeah.
He'd rather have one of you than a million of the other type that come on over to the other side. You know what I'm saying?
When I pick up his name and something that I'm reading, I feel like I have positive association with his thoughts, I didn't know much about his choice to be Christian. I'm kind of curious if his Christianity was something that he ever thought he might be able to dispose of.
Yeah, and I think that's something I haven't been able to touch on yet. Like I think a lot of the books that he wrote towards the end of his life, I might intimate where his thought was going on that, and I think I've got to get this dissertation done. But that's a book in and of itself. What one could do is post Kierkegaard. Ultimately, all these sort of existence stages, going from like an aesthetic existence, an ethical existence, a quasi-religious existence to Christian, if that ladder can eventually be kicked away and we all end up in the same place, maybe. Maybe. And that's a fascinating question I don't have the answer for.
Yeah. Well, that's actually been my own personal trajectory.
Yeah.
Because I sort of grew up in the Christian tradition and never really liked it, and my personal experience as I've gotten to grow older and continue to push on with religious studies and stuff like that, which is actually one of my very favorite things in the world.
Totally.
It's why I do this.
I think that's why we're friends. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Indeed. And so I've come to this point where my impression of most Christians is that they're kind of the least happy of all peoples that I'm aware of, and it blew my mind when I started thinking of that. I'm like, why is this the case? And I've gotten to this point sort of so it sent me back into the Bible in a sense. And so going into Matthew, I like Matthew. For some reason I just I don't read all the Gospels. I'll just go to Matthew, take it from Matthew, see what he says. And it's I keep turning up these things about quotes from Jesus where he'll say things like, this is going to be a paraphrase, and I wish I had the exact...
I've been paraphrasing this entire
I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, too, so, like, for the podcast listeners at this point, I'll refer you to the interview with Jen H, where I mentioned this, too. In the notes on the website, there's, like, the actual verse, but basically Jesus says something along the lines of, like, you can disparage my name all you want, and you'll be okay. But the unforgivable offense is to disparage the Spirit, you know? And so, like, that's sort of, like, what I take away from the Christian experience, and sort of where I see a possibility for why Christians around me are unhappy, because they're so attached to the name. You know, it's like they can't relinquish the name. It's very much about Jesus Christ, and, like, this naming thing, like, what am I doing? You know, it's like I have to call it this or I'm not okay. And, like, I don't care about the name. That's just my personality. I like radical things. I like it to be harder, because I believe that if it's harder, then the reward is more justified, essentially. Yeah. And so I wonder if Kierkegaard were here now, if he would be able to, you know, how he would interpret that verse, you know, and, like, if you can have the Spirit alive in you, but refuse to name it because the name is confusing, because the name confounds the issue, and, you know, makes it more dear somehow.
Well, there are a lot of issues I want to talk about. Like, I want to this. I want to touch on this, and then I want to go back to something, and I want to come back to this, because I don't have it, but I think for Kierkegaard, it's not the name, but that's so much important, but it is going to be in the nature of Christ, that he was both, on the Christian view, infinite and finite, married in earthly form.
Right.
That's going to be
powerful stuff.
That's going to be pretty essential, because it sets a limit for the intellect.
Right.
And so that one can then sort of open themselves up for a different sort of understanding. It gets us to stop having such a fetish for reason.
Okay.
And this is one of the knock against Kierkegaard, is that he's a rationalist, like, because he but it's important that Christ can't be thought.
Okay.
That we can't conceive of God in man's form, because then we open ourselves up to something else, a relationship, an understanding that's communicated to us, perhaps through emotion and subjectivity, and not so much cognitive apprehension.
Yeah.
But so I want to go. You can ask a question about that. But
okay. I was just being curious if, I mean, is it paradoxical to encourage the individual to become more an individual and yet still think of God as independent of that person's consciousness? Like, if Kierkegaard is saying God wants you to be the most you can be, but yet God is an independent who has its own preference or whatever. I mean, I guess the preference would simply be that you be the most individual, but what if your individuality was, you know, like sin or whatever? It's like, you know, the most me is adultery.
Well, yeah, no, that's an interesting. I think this raises further questions about how Kierkegaard conceived of sin, what it meant to sin, what it is to sin. Essentially, sin for Kierkegaard is just apartness from God. So, so whether you're committing adultery or, you know, laboriously working on logic problems and not developing essential sort of ethical religious knowledge, this is all going to be sin.
Right.
And in that sense, sin, everyone's in sin in that respect. The only way to get out of sin is to become reconciled with God.
Well done.
So but that raises an interesting question about, like, what if if God really wants me to be an individual, then he'll understand that that Nick or Luke's quintessential identity is bound up in seduction or something like that. Why are you trying to change me, God?
Right.
I mean, it raises an interesting question about when I say God wants us to be that He wants us to be individuals. I think what He's concerned about, like in the example of like being caught up in sex, that there's something that I think about it like there's something, we're just caught up in the temporal, like in the sense that like we're unfree. We're like kind of slavish to like the pursuit of pleasure, whether it be high-minded or sexual or something like that. And in that way we debase ourselves and we cheapen ourselves. We sort of reduce ourselves to animality in a certain respect. But it's through this sort of cultivation of the self on that arc, the trajectory that Kierkegaard talks about, that rips us out of that and constitutes us. Like everybody's an individual,
right?
But not everyone creates a self for Kierkegaard.
Okay.
Like everybody's individuated. No one else can live your life but you.
Yeah.
But you can fail to exist. You can fail to create a self, which for Kierkegaard is getting these polar parts of ourselves together.
Yeah.
And then ultimately consummated in God. But I want to. We can come back to that, but I want to just address the question about like, why does it seem like you were saying, like you go around and you see all these Christians that are miserable and they're unhappy, and I go around similarly, and like because of the reading of Kierkegaard, I see like everyone is suffering from some sort of despair, including myself. I think Kierkegaard was very concerned that it wasn't Christianity that was creating people to be so miserable and to make them lash out at other people and to judge and to shame people. That's not what Christianity does.
Right.
But the way that it was being practiced and the way how people were taught they could relate to God, was ultimately creating a situation that, and I think we could probably this is something that I think he would definitely want to address in America today, is that it was creating a situation that, for whatever reason, people weren't experiencing the comfort of God, but they were disrupted by it because they weren't relating to God in the right way, and that disruption was causing them to lash out at other people and somehow in order to raise themselves up if they put other people down.
Right.
And it's a big problem with the church, right? Like a lot of people, like I've had to, all the time, I have to answer for people who say crazy things in the name of Christianity. They're like, defend yourself against this comment or that comment. I'm like, I don't defend myself against anything.
I didn't say that.
I didn't fucking say that. Like, It would be like, this white dude said that.
Right.
You're a white dude. Defend yourself against white dude. Like this white dude. And I'm like, and you can apply this all over the place. But I can't tell you the number of times I'm called to do that, and like I just fuck this, man. Like I didn't say this shit. Like if you want to have like a sincere conversation with about what it means to have like a faith relationship, we can have that. But I'm not going to be called to the carpet for something I didn't do.
Right, yeah.
But
does it bother you that Christian, like, it's like, I guess you and I are seeing Christianity in a sort of different way, because like, I mean, if I identified as a Christian, I think I would be bothered by the Christian, like, the way it looks in society. But if, it's like I'm obviously a white guy, I don't care about the way a white guy looks in society, because it's like I feel like I have a choice more so with the Christianity, I guess, maybe than like the Caucasianness.
It only bothers me like on punctuated instances, to be honest.
Yeah, right.
Like, to be honest, like, I'm more preoccupied with my relationship with God,
right.
And the people I care about in my life to worry about perception.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that that's not important. That could be important on different levels, and possibly doing a podcast like this contributes to some sort of positive PR for Christianity writ large. Or maybe I'm doing it a disservice. I don't know. Maybe I'm
certainly positive in my mind,
maybe,
in my eyes.
Yeah, maybe I'm going to get a call from the president of Liberty and being like, who's this Luke Johnson kid? Find him.
Yeah.
We got to shut him up.
I'm the professor from Emory.
So, I don't know. I could be causing myself a lot of grief by saying these things. I guess I don't really obsess about it that much. But I guess on occasion I do have people. I think the only time that it's really upsetting to me is when I see people, like when people come to me and they're hurting.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And they acknowledge their sort of brokenness, and they acknowledge that they've done a lot of things that they regret, and they don't know how to get themselves out of a situation. Things feel hopeless for them, and what makes me upset is that for me, like my faith has been very helpful for me in terms of dealing with depression and anxiety and treating people with compassion and equality and all of those things. I feel like it has sustained me, and it's sustained a very healthy outlook on humanity. And that's something I wish more people could experience. Now, they may experience it through Islam or Judaism or Buddhism or something else. I mean, I think it's possible with anything. But because of all that lashing out and that hatred from these cultural Christians, spirituality is not a real option for a lot of people that are really suffering, and I think it could do them a ton of good.
Yeah.
And that's when I get upset. That's when I get upset at the evangelical militantism, where you're either with us or against us, or if you disagree with us on the nature of social issues like homosexuality or something like that, then you're sinning as well. Like, that drives me up the wall, because I think there are just so many people out there who are suffering, who need to know about, and whether it's true or not, we can't ever really know, but we can honestly disagree.
It makes something happen, then it's true enough, is it not?
Well, and that's an interesting philosophical point. But I'm just talking about the emotional aspect here. Is that I think it would be very helpful for people to know that on a Christian worldview and other religious worldviews, God never abandons you.
Right.
And that if you have the right relationship with God, it's all about acceptance and forgiveness, and once you yourself have been forgiven, to demonstrate that magnanimity with other individuals as well.
Yes.
And
why do you think there's such an attraction for people who are interested in Christianity to sort of build walls,
I think it goes back to what we started out earlier, is I think people are afraid to confront existence, and like oftentimes what they do, rather than be objectively reflective about it and really meditate on why these issues and have the like what you and I doing having this conversation right now is hard. Right? It's like, I'm sure after we do it, we're going to feel emotionally drained and cerebrally drained in a certain way. But not only that, the amount of preparation that our whole lives, like the fact that we can ask these questions intelligently and try to figure out answers, a tremendous amount of work has gone into that. So, I think Christianity has been mass marketed, and people seek out easy answers to give them parameters for existence, and can't handle nuance or can't handle ambiguity, and can't handle if someone legitimately disagrees with them, to show them grace and respect. And I think that's what Kierkegaard was trying to do in his own time. I'm not sure if he had to deal with the sort of the militantism of evangelical Christianity, if that was what he had to deal with, like we have to deal with in our culture. But I'm 100% certain that Kierkegaard will reimagine the project differently in America today. And I I think if I proceed with trying to be a Kierkegaard scholar, I think maybe that would be a contribution that I would like to do, is to, on the one hand, deal with trying to bring civility back in terms of the political realm, where you have people just like being terrible, where you have like, you know, everybody. Have you noticed this thing? Like everybody's obsessed with shame. Have you noticed this? Like if you so people who are gay feel shamed by Christians, and people who are very liberal, like if you disagree with them, they'll shame you. I was like,
why do you do this?
I was like, where do you guys have the energy to be outraged? And I am so fucking exhausted. Like I don't have the energy to shame shame somebody that disagrees with me.
I mean, like I wish people were more busy so they could get to that level of tiredness or something.
Like,
It's
like where does this come from? I'm just like, it's like shame on you. What, are you casting a spell on me?
What's gonna happen next?
Oh my God, you just shamed me.
Yeah. Is there any way I can undo that?
Oh my God, you shamed. Yeah. Like maybe if I lie and say I agree with you, you'll take the shame away, because I just can't handle the shame you've put on me.
I know this shame is really going to keep me up tonight.
Yeah, but I mean, that seems to be the thing. It seems like everybody's shaming each other.
Absolutely.
The religious people are shaming non-religious people. Non-religious people are shaming people that disagree with them. It's craziness. And
what do you think? I mean, does Kierkegaard mention anything like that in his own time?
I don't think he deals with that concept, but I think it's an extension of those things. I think, like I said, with the mass Christianity, I think people are having other people do the thinking for them.
Yeah.
And they're living in absolutes, and they're living in ideology. Kierkegaard thought that ideology stultified us, that it made us not evolve and grow. And if people have an ideology that's like they get from a pastor or a politician or a professor or something like that they can live by, like they can attach a great deal of like emotional animus to it and use it as a weapon against all those that disagree with them. And then people who don't have an ideology, but yet feel hollow and empty because they may feel disconnected from humanity or God or whatever, I think they lash out at people too. Mm-hmm. And then people who have, another type of mass marketed ideology, be it Marxism or whatever, they do the exact same thing Christians do. Ideology is a terrible, terrible poison.
Yeah.
And I mean,
another great quote.
And it's everywhere.
Yes.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And people only want to recognize the ideology of how ideological their opponent is, but they don't want to recognize that they're just as imprisoned to ideology as well.
Is this part of your studies? Like, is this part of something that gets discussed?
I'm improvising.
Okay, right on.
I'm
just curious if this is like running through the academic. Like, I'm not in school, so.
I think it depends. I mean, you can't stereotype, right? I mean, I think.
Yeah.
I think animus and ideology is in every walk of life.
Yeah.
And I think there are wonderful and beautiful people in every walk of life. The question is, when we look at the exemplars of the wonderful and beautiful people who manage to practice kindness and morality towards one another and seem to have a sense of fulfillment and meaning in life, what are they doing right?
Right.
I think that's the important thing, and trying to figure it out from there. And for the people that are sort of mired in the extremes of ideology, how do we avoid these picnics?
Do you think that?
So no one's got a monopoly on virtue. Nobody's got a monopoly on ideology.
Yeah,
that's
true.
I think that's that. If there was like one thing I would want people to take seriously, it would be that right there. I didn't know you were still here. I go back and forth. We're doing a podcast right now.
Yeah.
Right now, you're doing
Right now, and you're on it right
I'm
now.
on the podcast.
You're on the
I always
podcast.
wanted to be on a podcast.
Plug your cause.
I listen to podcasts all day long.
Would
And now I
you?
can finally say, oh yeah.
Nice. I'm Nick.
I'm Jason.
This is he's a very smart guy as well. So maybe you want to do one with him at some point.
That
too.
would be
this
nice.
Is Jason. This is him.
And I can say shit and fuck and stuff, right? Is
Yeah,
that-
I have been dropping
It's a
out.
podcast.
I've been dropping.
That wouldn't be a
out all over.
podcast without
Exactly. I feel like that's my favorite part of podcasts. Is the new people that always get like, they always say, oh blah blah fuck. Oh, can I swear on one of these things? Because they don't know. It's still new. It's still fresh.
Yeah. The FCC hasn't gotten to it yet.
Yeah. So, and thank goodness.
Well, cool.
Yeah. So you're back in town
Yeah, I'm around I'm actually moving at the end of July.
to California?
No, to Massachusetts, like I said, Boston.
Okay, cool. You've been in California, though, right?
No, I've been here.
Oh, okay. Just Kelly's been in California.
Yeah, sort of. So,
She's in Santa Cruz?
I'm Nick.
yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Right.
Yeah, no, but just trying to do something different. Gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
Trying to do some stuff with
Seen
art
this
for a
movie
while.
before, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's my friend down from Boston. So I'm
Oh, you're down
around.
from Boston as well? What's your name?
Alex.
Luke. Nice to meet you.
He's a real creative cat as
Cool.
well.
What do you do?
What am I
He's a
doing?
filmmaker.
Yeah.
And he's Batman.
What don't I do?
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You make like feature films or?
No, short stuff.
Cool.
I do like other stuff as well. Just installation and stuff. Or, I don't know, depends. A lot of collages too. I don't have anything.
Have you been in film school or?
Yeah, a little. Well, kind
You
of.
studied film?
Yeah,
Where were you at?
I was at Brown.
Oh, okay.
Might not finish.
Huh?
Might not finish at Brown.
He's gonna move to China and make energy.
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
My friend wants to do that. He wants to build free energy devices.
Like the stuff you get from like power lines and stuff like that. Like you just
He's got
ambient.
some crazy ideas.
Is this the one where you can just like take your cell phone and just capture the energy from the atmosphere?
Something like that, yeah.
I've seen some promising like contraptions. It's like
With cell phones.
it's like a guy in Germany, a guy like in Berlin. I was reading about it. I think he made an adapter for his smartphone where he could charge a battery just by walking by power lines, walking by lights, and just stuff that was just there. You could just take it from the air.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Maybe we should take
That's awesome.
I'll try. I posted the article like a month and a half ago or something like that. I'll try to find it. I found it. It was either on Wired or Science News or something like that. But yeah, I'm like that guy's gonna be a 100 billionaire or whatever. Like if he can figure out how to do. I mean.
That
Sure,
was
Marketing, he just uses it to take over the world.
Yeah, because
yeah, he just like he's like I could sell this or I could just conquer it.
Exactly. That's the mistake everybody makes. They share it.
Yeah. $500 billion, dude, you're selling yourself short.
Yeah.
How about a planet?
Totally. Exactly.
Complete dominion.
Yep, you got it. Try that. Well, cool. Hope we didn't derail the podcast too much.
No, I think it's supposed to be like
kind of podcast I like. Yeah.
Great. Cool. I'll have to get the Earl URL from you at some point.
Yeah. I'll give you.
I guess Earl's on hit. That's why I said it like that.
I don't even know.
GIF, URL, Earl, GUI, GUI. I don't know.
That's the one in the hearts. If you just Google Emissary podcast, you'll find it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm famous.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, cool kids. Jason does a lot of stuff with like ecology and biology. I think he's like really into like birds.
Yeah, right.
What's the study? It's like ornithology. Yeah. I think he's. But I don't know. It's been a while since I've talked to him about that stuff.
Yeah. I think I wrote down a question I wanted to ask you about philosophy's relationship to biology. I'm not sure.
Oh God, that's a huge question.
What it says that. I may not have even formulated the question.
God.
I had one in my mouth.
Oh Lord, this is a huge question.
I guess the question is somehow sort of related to like neuroplasticity and like epigenetics, or just this notion of like, in science there's this idea that the way that you think can change your actual biological physiology. And so like it's called neuroplasticity, and then also there's this notion of like epigenetics, where experiences would be able to activate or deactivate genes in your chromosomes. And so like if what we're talking about is an emotional type of impulse, or like an emotional stimulation, could somehow have an effect on actual biology. Like if you go through a traumatic experience in your third trimester of pregnancy or something like that, it's going to somehow affect a certain gene.
I mean, this, you know, speaking to the science of this, I studied science a long time ago. I like in my undergrad, I had a science degree as well.
Okay.
My undergrad was 11 years ago.
Right.
So, it's gonna. Speaking about the discrete mechanisms and things like that, if I were to talk about it with some authority, you'd have to call bullshit, because I can't say it. But I think the important thing before we start to try to tackle this question is real. Something I noticed, we're talking about imprisoning ideologies.
Yeah.
People like wrap themselves in science. And, like, I am science, man.
Right.
Like I repel all your superstition and your ideas, and therefore whatever I say is true.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit. Because here's the real deal. Is like we don't know what we're doing in science. Like I'll go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, I don't think the doctor is like accustomed to having this inquisitive patient like myself. I'm like, when I take this pill, what happens?
Take it.
Like what does it do? What does it? And like ultimately, after the chain of inquiry, after about 4 or 5 questions, and like they'll just be like, you know what? We don't know why it does what it does. It just works.
Wow,
The thing is, science is like shifting all the time. The paradigms.
Yeah.
Like this is the thing to dogmatically like drape yourself in science. I was reading an article or something like that. There's actually a new study, a new sort of discipline coming out called like scienmetrics or something like this.
Okay.
It measures the duration of scientific truth.
The duration of
science.
Wow.
And at this point in human history, it has determined, like fledgling whatever they're called, that the half-life for a human truth is 45.5 years.
Really?
Right. So for this point, that's crazy. I know. So like things that we believed 50 years ago or 60 years ago, like we're like, fuck that. That's totally wrong now. I mean, some things have endured, obviously. But I mean, there have been scientific paradigms that endured for hundreds of years, and then they were like overturned. This classic example being like the clash between Newtonian mechanics and Einstein's Einstein didn't do quantum mechanics. He resisted it, but quantum mechanics and the classical Newtonian theory, right? Like, and these things are like totally at odds with each other. How they're going to reconcile, who knows? I can't even talk to that. But there's just so much we don't know.
Right.
And I think when it comes to the mind-body interaction, this is something that people like to pretend they know. They don't. I mean, it's fucking crazy. Right before I came here, I read an article about a guy who studies near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And like
another one of my infatuations.
Like, and he's like, and one time he's like treating it totally like a science.
Okay. Yeah.
But on the other hand, he's like, yeah. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I have no ability to account for it. He's like, I brought people back from death tens of hundreds of times. All I know is that consciousness can endure beyond death. I'm not saying there's a soul or an afterlife or
So
anything.
this is some guys like.
This is like a neuro.
I did it, and
it's like
it works. Okay.
This is like a surgeon or a neuroscientist who's like really taking on all these things. He has no idea why it happens.
Yeah.
And he was just sort of talking about different ways to think about it. But saying all that, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the mental affects the physical.
Yeah.
It's only when we get into the problem of where we think that we're all physical that this is an issue. Now,
yeah.
So what were the two examples you used? Epigenetics and
neuroplasticity. Yeah.
Yeah. So. I mean, part of me wants to say that's totally plausible.
Yeah.
Like I think about it, like if I think about it in terms of there are probably some very extreme examples of neuronal plasticity. Like I can think of like people who've like given themselves stigmata.
Okay.
They've been like so. I mean, I think stigmata has been something that's been diagnosed.
Yeah, I think it has.
Like no one, but like essentially someone's worked themselves up into such a religious fervor that they actually start mimicking the morphology of Christ.
Right.
Or something like that. Now there might be a complete rational explanation for it, but apparently it has happened. But let's not deal with something like that can be disputed.
That might be a rational explanation.
It might be, but like, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Like if you have, like I'm someone who suffers a tremendous amount of anxiety, and that comes from my mental states, so like this anxiety. And like other things, like it goes and fucks up my body.
Yeah.
Like like this
stress.
Part, like it's made it so I can't sleep. It's messed up my stomach.
Yeah.
Like it's like so. There's no doubt in my mind that the mental. Now what a physicalist neuroscientist will tell you is that anxiety is a physical brain correlate and not something epiphenomenal.
Right.
But this is another irresolvable issue.
Do you think that's sort of? This to me seems like an interesting place to be because it sort of like refers back to this notion of should. Like how separate should our disciplines be? Should we strive for having domains that are, maybe just? I feel like we don't allow our subjects of study to overlap enough, sort of. It's like there's this resistance to incorporating some kind of like biological aspect into philosophy. Or, I can't speak for those things specifically, but I do feel like there's some kind of like thread of culture where people want their subject of study to stay like pure or something, like.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately because on the one hand, I think you want them to be as integrated as possible because I think they serve as good checks and balances against each other. And it allows for a fuller understanding of what human knowledge could possibly look like. On the other hand, it drives me up the wall. And on the other hand, it drives me up the wall because the way our society is constituted right now, it looks like you have to be on the side of religion or the side of science, right? And it drives me up the fucking wall when individuals from either one of those trespass into the other area. So I mentioned that Stephen Hawking recently. He was giving a talk. I can't remember. He was giving a talk to some physicists recently where he was propounding this idea that M theory could explain the universe without God. Okay? And like the article was terribly written. It really didn't give the argument for how this could happen. It didn't really even explain M theory. I think it was probably just an attempt to get people to read the article. But like, I'm just like, that's cool. But like, Stephen Hawking is like a physicist, and a physicist deals with matter. And like if there is a God, like he's not going to be susceptible to like the materialist physics of the physicists.
Yeah.
So to me, like it drove me up the wall. Like people look to, I'm fuck, man.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I love Stephen
Because
Hawking.
of Stephen Hawking.
I love Stephen Hawking.
Right.
I will listen to Stephen Hawking all day long. But like I think at some point, maybe I think scientists start to think that they're the new priests.
Yeah, yeah.
That they're allowed to solve our existential and metaphysical problems when really, when really, like, they're not, they're trespassing into another domain. I see this all the time with Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, yeah.
People love them some Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what? When it comes to evolutionary biology, like, I'm going to hang on every single word he has to say.
Yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to theology, politics, or anything else,
Yeah.
like, I'm going to call bullshit. Because
Yeah.
he's not, I'm like he may be able to offer up some insights every once in a while, but he's not going to be some guru that I'm going to follow.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, because of this bifurcation, you have this happen. Now, I'll take it from the other perspective. Like, people who, like, desperately want to prove the Bible through science, right?
Yeah, right.
So you have, like, creation science, right? Or, like, people who want creationism to be taught alongside evolution in a biology classroom. Again, a category mistake. Like, and so you've, so I'm torn on this. There's a duality, like on the one hand, I think noisy theologians and noisy atheist scientists are trespassing into areas that aren't their domain and not showing much compassion or sympathy or understanding from conflicting points of view.
Yeah.
At the same time, to neglect, like, you know, as someone who's, like, I'm very, you know, for me to neglect any area of study as a philosopher, as someone who's inclined towards a religious or anything like that, like, would feel profoundly wrong.
Yeah,
like if I were to just dismiss physics, or just dismiss poetry, or just dismiss statistics, or something like that. Like there's something really fucked up about that. So I guess the question, they ought to be integrated,
And my sister was there to witness this.
but it's trying to figure out the way in which they are to be integrated. Because the way they are right now, I'm worried that they're integrated in dangerous ways that do nothing but that do nothing but promulgate toxic ideology.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct.
Right, so like people feel like, I don't know what to think about something. What is that Neil Tyson guy? What does he think?
Yeah.
Well, he's a smart physicist, and he thinks this about politics and religion. Therefore, I think this.
Yeah, right.
You're outsourcing your thinking to somebody else.
Yeah.
And that might be okay when they're an expert in a field.
Yeah.
But when they're not an expert in a field, that's when I think it's really dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't even know. Here's the thing. I don't even know if you can have experts in things that involve transcendental concepts of the good. I think if there is a God, he may have made it so that there can't be any experts in these things. That there may be people that can obsess about these things, can devote a lot of time and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the beautiful thing. I think if there is a God, maybe he wants that ambiguity so everyone can figure it out for themselves. So they don't get trapped by the ideology. They don't get hired. They don't hire somebody else to do the thinking for them.
Yeah.
That they have to do the heavy lifting and figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
So maybe people who walk around as like theologians and political science and things like that, I'm not saying they don't have some use in teaching history of thought and something like that, but if they're trying to say, I've got it figured out and you just have to buy into this, I think you got to call bullshit.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately, I think we're doing violence to our souls if we look to other people to figure these things out for us. Now, engineering issues and climate issues and whatever else, those things might, but things that involve human goods that aren't tangible, art, beauty, beauty. I'm running out of steam here, but beauty and the right thing and virtue and stuff like that. I think we're supposed to use our own faculties to figure this out, and we can turn to ethicists and whatever else to kind of help us, but whatever their theory is seems incomplete.
Do you think there's an effective way to teach that?
I think part of what we're doing is one way. Right?
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is a contribution to that effort.
It's like you teach techniques rather than facts or something.
Yeah, I think at least in like philosophy, like the way I look at it is it's a method. It's not necessarily an end result. That it's sort of a methodology of questioning that I hope gets transmitted to other people, and they pick up on it for themselves and can take it to whatever domain they end up going into. So I think that's the technique that gets passed on, and I think that's the value of philosophy.
Okay.
So, and then I think when you breathe some humanity into it, when you confess the limitations of your knowledge and say, well, I just don't know. And can practice in the classroom or in this environment where you can practice generosity and charity in regards to someone who may disagree with you. I think then you start getting into it kind of being like an art form.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So you take cold technique and you breathe some humanity into it. I think you got something that resembles an art form that can potentially edify and make people's lives better. In the short term, maybe the long term. We'll never know. I can't do a philosophical assessment of the impact of this podcast or the effect that I have on the world, but maybe something that you say to me or I say to you will resonate long after this conversation. And
right.
I hope it does. I think it will, probably.
I think so too.
I think for me, that's my perspective on philosophy. It's not to find truth. It's not to win arguments, but to practice, to figure out if I've really led an exam in my life, if I've really thought for myself or I've led someone else through thinking, and also have I done something to break down ideology and pass on intellectual virtue in some way. I think that would be my posture towards philosophy and what I would like to see more of.
Yeah.
But I've had some amazing people mentor me in that way, and then I think my faith influenced a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Whew, I'm fading, bro.
Yeah, no, that's.
Are we? How are we doing? Is this?
I
you
feel
think you got
like
enough
that's
material?
a nice place to end, you know, because I mean, it ties it together really well as far as like what sort of brought you into it and like sort of how, just like how you are doing what you do, which essentially is the point of the podcast. It's called the Emissary podcast, which essentially means what do we represent,
Yeah.
And it's like that's a good place to end for me.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. So when do you release these things and when do you put them up?
I'll probably put it up tomorrow.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stop it now. Thank you very much.
No problem, man.
Luke Johnson. Yeah.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
We should talk about collaborating in this way in the future and stuff like that. Because like I said, I've got some ideas about getting people more excited about philosophy and whatnot in the future. But I need to go eat.
Yeah.
I need to go get some work done.
Yes. You want to plug anything before we officially call it?
Oh, I mean, I've got a couple emergent heart records coming out here this summer, so keep an eye out for those.
Check those out. I'll put a link too.
Yeah. Excellent.
So, yeah,
it's gonna be some good stuff. Those records have turned out pretty nice. I've been sitting on them for a while. So
I've enjoyed the ones that I've listened to. Yeah.
I think,
and that's how Luke and I, sort of struck it up.
Yeah, these. I I think I got very Brian Wilson-y on this last EP.
Oh yeah.
Which was great.
Yeah.
Which was great. I definitely got to swing for the fences in terms of production.
That's awesome.
But now I'm sort of thinking about, like, I'm thinking about how I figured out how to write good pop songs and arty pop songs and interesting stuff. I think the question for me now, maybe a subject for another podcast, is how does one really innovate? How does one perhaps create a new genre of music?
Yeah.
And I think that's the next challenge for me.
Yeah.
So
it's a worthy endeavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. All right, man. I'm gonna get out of here.
Okay.
It was really great seeing you. I'm gonna go.